Welcome to the Wealth Exchange, your access to the experts addressing the issues affluent families across Canada face every day. From market commentary and planning strategies to leadership and philanthropy, we discuss the subjects that matter to you.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our latest podcast. And today we have a very, very special guest. His name is David Long. David Long is the CEO of the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. And David and the food bank have an extraordinary story. But before we get into that, David,
yes,
why don't we talk about your background, a little bit about where you're coming from and how you managed to arrive here and why you decided to come here.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, John, for having me on the podcast. I think it's great. I came to Canada. I'm originally from Ireland. I came to Canada in 1996. I'm a classically trained chef. I worked in your favorite hotel chain, Four Seasons, for 3 years. I worked in the Ritz in London. I've been very fortunate to travel the world, and I ended up in Vancouver back in 1996.
Yeah.
And did a number of different things, and I spent about 10 years of my career at the Terminal City Club, one of my favorite city clubs, probably in the world. I'm a little bit biased, but I was the chef there, and the gentleman who had been the CEO for many years retired, and I ridiculously thought, I can run this club, and wrote a letter to the chairman of the board. And I actually went through a series, as you can imagine. Back then, it was Ray and Berntson, Townsend Mitchell, the executive search company.
Okay.
It's now Boyden. And
oh, right. I've heard of that.
And became good friends of a couple of partners over the years now since then. But I got into the final 15 of applicants for the CEO role of the club. And remember, this is the guy in the kitchen coming into the CEO role.
Right.
Got into the final 15, and I remember I went home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the final 15. This is unbelievable. And then I got into the final 4, and I thought, oh, what have I done? I must be out of my mind. Anyway, the board made a decision to give me an opportunity, and as I say, I spent 10 years of my life there as the CEO of the club. And I think what people don't necessarily appreciate, maybe more nowadays, but what they don't necessarily appreciate is that an executive chef, the numbers, the food costs, the labor costs, trying to build revenues, and it's all part of running a kitchen or a big brigade. And I'm a real numbers guy, and so I became the CEO. Learned a lot of different things along the way. Had some amazing boards of directors, and had an amazing time. To be honest, loved it.
Well, I would imagine those leadership skills you learned as executive chef were really helpful in actually moving into the CEO role, and probably been incredibly helpful in coming into this CEO role here.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I never forget. I was for another role that I took with another executive search company. I had to do a sort of a psychological profile. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, I'll tell you a quick story. And I was being interviewed by this gentleman. Doing this profile kind of analysis of who you are. And he said to me, one of the things I'd written down was that I do well is I build really good teams. And he asked me in this interview, he said, how do you build a good team? And I looked at him and I went absolutely blank. And I said, I have no idea. And I said, that's probably the worst answer I could give you. And I'll never forget that he said to me, no, that's a great answer. Because if that's what you do and you don't know how you do it, it's a gift. And for me, that was like this mind-blowing moment where I was like, wow, I guess that's all I do. I build good teams.
Well, it's really strange because I'm a big fan of what I would call the iterative process, and so is my son Christopher. So basically, you start with a problem, and you don't have any idea how you're going to get to the answer to it. But what you're going to do is you're going to try X.
Yep.
And when X only works a little bit, but you're 20% ahead of where you are today, you say, okay, I'll take the 20%, and now I'll do Y, and then I'll do Z, and so on and so forth.
Cool.
And pretty soon, you had this iterative process that you couldn't have planned. You couldn't have written on paper.
No.
Right? But somehow you kind of ground your way through that process, and eventually you're at the other end.
Pretty much describes the last 8 years at the food bank. I didn't know what I was getting into.
So when you came to the food bank, the food bank has some very unique features today, which we're going to talk about.
Yep.
But when you came here, was the Greater Vancouver Food Bank relatively traditional as food banks go?
Very much so. It was sort of what I call the old model of food banking. The Greater Vancouver Food Bank, you got to remember, it started in 1983 as a temporary measure. And it was very traditional. There were about 6,000 clients, but it literally was run on basically sort of surplus excess food, what I call now post-consumer. So what was left over at the grocery store, and a lot of the food that was distributed might have come from public food drives. So I was guilty of it as well. Many years ago, my daughters are both in their 20s now, but they come home from high school and it's like, oh, I forgot to tell you that there's a food drive for the food bank tomorrow at 8:00 at night, and you clean out your kitchen cupboards.
Yes.
And so that was kind of the old model that I inherited 8 years ago. And interestingly enough, about a year before I worked at the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, I volunteered for a day with another company, another organization I was working with, and a day to give back. And I volunteered with the CEO of that company. And we did the food sort, the traditional food sort, as a volunteer, and you're sorting through.
Well, and making the bags up.
Oh yeah, and it was a lot of instant noodles, and it was a lot of old cans of beans and craft dinner and things like that. And I remember thinking when I walked away, like, wow, it's not the greatest food to be giving people. And then here I am, there I was a year after that. Actually, I had the opportunity to come and work at the food bank. So I knew I could make a difference.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, because maybe from your point of view, you look at things and in hindsight, you can think of them as being relatively archaic. But I remember the first time that we had people in our company volunteer to work at the food bank. It was like a party. I mean, the whole idea of organizing that, getting things in the bags and then handing them out and stuff like that, it was like Christmas. So basically, from the volunteers' perspective, that was the fun part of coming to the food bank as a volunteer, right? It was probably, as you say, highly inefficient, right? But it was the reason you chose, of the volunteer gigs you could do. You could go to Union Gospel Mission and you could basically serve meals at Christmas, stuff like that. Yeah. But the food bank was one of the big ones.
Yeah, but I think what we've done with the transition that we've made with the food bank is that it's always been volunteers make up such a huge part of what we do. We have about 50,000 hours of volunteer time a year.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of probably another 27 or 30 employees. So we couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. But what we've done now with our transition to fresh food, I think it's an even better experience.
Yeah.
Because when you're handing out to people in need and quality food, and you're handing out milk and eggs and fresh fruit and fresh vegetables.
Right.
And you see the smile on people's faces when you're giving kids, in our kids packs, there's boxes of Cheerios.
Yeah.
The smile on these kids' faces, it's a very different experience now than it would have been 8 years ago.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, because obviously the whole thing has evolved, and it's not just, in your case, simply what you deliver to individuals. It's the logistics of what you're trying to build as an organization. So how would you describe the general difference of the food bank today against when you started 8 years ago?
How long yes. It's completely different. We went from what was the traditional model of the food bank is post-consumer. It's whatever's left over at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So we went to the other end of that, which is what I call pre-consumer, where we get a lot of our food, a lot of the fresh food we get hasn't been to grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And what people they don't really realize, and what I'm really trying to get across to people, and when I talk to individuals like yourself when you first came, there's such an abundance of food. There is no shortage of food. Mm-hmm. And I say the same thing, and I'm going to say it again. My team's going to laugh at me, but there's no shortage of food. There's a distribution problem.
Right.
So when we get our donations now, we're getting food from farmers. We're getting food from greenhouse operations. We're getting food from distribution centers of the grocery stores. So there's massive distribution centers that supply the grocery stores with food.
Right.
And they have a huge amount and a huge surplus of food.
Yeah.
And they'll have another shipment of food coming in. So whatever hasn't sold at the grocery store, and remember the grocery store shelves have to be full all the time or the public panic. If you remember back to the pandemic.
Oh no, absolutely.
And so they
start to clean up the
they
shelves.
always have a surplus of food. And so when they have more food coming to that distribution warehouse, we then go and we pick up, and that makes space for that next shipment of food coming in.
All right, so there's two different areas of supply here then. Basically, they're in the parlance of other industries. Essentially, you've got a manufacturing issue where basically the amount of being produced it's in excess of the demand, ultimate demand for the food.
Absolutely.
In the first place.
Yeah.
And so either that food goes to waste, or depending on how effective you can be as an organization, you can aggregate that food.
Yep.
And then redistribute the food to people that really can't afford to buy that food or acquire that food on their own.
No, absolutely. And I say that, I tell people, quite often, so Canada produces enough food to feed 52 million people. There's only 40 million people in the country,
Right.
and 7 million people go to bed hungry.
Right.
And in fact, the numbers are actually growing now, because it's about 1 in 4 Canadians have some form of food insecurity, which means they can't get as much food as they actually need for their family. So that's 10 million people.
Yeah, no, that's a risk. And how much of that is driven more recently by things like, well, at least in certain areas like Vancouver, Toronto, by the impact of housing prices, and then across the country, energy prices and inflation, all of these other factors?
Hugely. In fact, if you look at the consumer price index, the graph of the consumer price index over the years, if you look back over the last 5 years on the CPI, just to show inflation and the increase in costs, when you map that against the registrations of the food bank, our graph of new registrations maps that pretty much exactly. So as if you take, for example, on the consumer price index, food has gone up 30% inflation, 30% more expensive now than it was in 2021, but wages certainly haven't gone up 30%.
No.
So there's this huge disparity. And when I see the price of, when I see the price of gas, I just saw something today, like a $2.12 a liter.
Yeah.
When literally people are living so close to the edge of paycheck to paycheck, when gas goes up 10 cents, we see more people coming to the food bank.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense.
It's frightening.
Right, yeah. And I mean, and at the same time, those price pressures impact the actual cost of the food itself. I mean, both in terms of production and in transportation and everything else.
Absolutely. But you want to know something really ridiculous? As the price of food increases, we actually get more food.
Because less food is being bought.
Less food is being bought by the general public. So a couple of years ago, when turkeys were really expensive, people were buying chicken, or I'm going to have a ham, I'll do something different. That January, we actually got about 4,000 turkeys donated.
All right.
So it's kind of this ridiculous thing that people don't realize.
But then you have to figure out a way to deliver that food within a reasonable time frame.
Well, they're frozen turkeys.
Yeah, they're frozen.
Frozen turkeys, then we gave them out to our agency partners.
Okay.
So there's this kind of, there's a difference there. But
maybe you can explain how that aspect of your it's not a business, it's your organization works. You talk about agency partners. I mean, you've got obviously people coming here, needing or getting food directly, but a large part of the organization is based on what you do to supply other organizations, right?
Exactly. And so what we do is we distribute food in 2 ways. We distribute directly to families. We have about 16,000 people right now a week that we support in the Vancouver area in direct distribution. And then the other thing that we do is we distribute to our agency partners, and we have approximately about 180 agencies. And those are, a lot of them are in Vancouver, but we also have a lot of in the Fraser Valley or further out. We also have other food banks that we consider agencies.
Right.
So we supply other food banks from Whistler, Pemberton, all the way back down through Vancouver, out through the Fraser Valley. We go out as far as, we go up to Lake Country in the Okanagan.
Okay.
We distribute food to all those agencies. And on an annual basis, we distribute about 10 million pounds of food. So just over 5 million pounds of food goes directly to people and their families.
Right.
The other 5 million pounds of food goes to these agency partners.
Okay. All right. So you and I were talking earlier about the surplus of food and maybe expand on the impact that greenhousing is having, specifically in Canada, on that surplus. Is this actually going to get to be a bigger issue in the future?
Well, there just is so much surplus food, and in the Lower Mainland, I think this was the first year that the greenhouses grew all year, and so we saw a huge influx of more food being donated. We had 20 pallets of tomatoes a week. Mm-hmm. We had an endless amount of cucumbers and peppers and everything you can imagine that gets grown in a greenhouse. And there's other areas of Canada where it's seeing the same thing. In fact, Windsor, Ontario is the biggest concentration of greenhousing in North America. Mm-hmm. And they have a massive surplus of food.
Now, is that climate related in some way, or is it just they have the land?
No, I think they just have the land and in these specific areas. But the average farmer, because of the policies of the grocery stores, the average farmer grows about 10% more than they need. And so if you think, just break it down into, we have many farmers that support us, but one of our farmers has 800 acres of land.
Yeah.
So that means he's growing 80 acres of any particular crop in excess, so he can meet the specifications of the contract that he has with one of the big grocery chains. So that's 80 acres of surplus that he, it might not be the right size, it might not be completely perfect, but it's certainly nutritious, healthy food that we could use.
So you talked earlier, you and I were talking earlier, maybe even a year ago, about your use of provincial tax credits to negotiate deals with farmers. So how does that work?
The provincial government in British Columbia, there's 4 provinces across Canada, but in British Columbia, there's a 25% tax credit. And so this was introduced, but unfortunately many farmers are not aware that it exists. Mm-hmm. So basically what it is on the day that they have surplus, say for example, they have 100,000 pounds of tomatoes.
Yeah.
They donate that to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. We offer them a 25% tax credit on the value of those tomatoes at market that day.
So not at their cost?
No, it's at whatever they can sell it at market that day. So we do some research. We find three different quotes on what that value is.
Yeah.
And we give them a tax credit, a 25% tax credit on the value of that food. And for one farmer last year, we got about just over 2 million pounds of vegetables from one farmer last year, and I think it was August. He actually paid off $1 million tax bill from the previous year by donating that product. So it's something I hope continues into the future, because it not only helps the food bank, obviously, but it helps the farmers.
So is this a BC initiative only?
No, it's in 4 provinces. In fact, in Quebec, I think it's about 50%. Okay. And I actually toured the Minister of Agriculture last week through our Winston Street location, and I asked him hopefully to not only continue the farmer tax credit, but maybe consider increasing it.
So one of the questions I was going to ask you about the people that you're serving on a regular basis, the 16,000 that you talked about. So how much of their dilemma is related to simply the inability to find a reasonable paying job?
A lot. There's people are always surprised when I talk about across Canada, about 20% of people using the food bank have a full-time job.
Yeah.
In Vancouver, from our data and our stats, it's 30% of our clients have a full-time job and can't make ends meet.
Right.
A lot of people, maybe it's a single parent, or they're trying to make ends meet. Money just doesn't go far enough. And when you have fixed costs, whether it's rent or a car or insurance or heating, the last area that you can probably cut back on is food.
People know how serious the homeless issue is in Vancouver, but really, basically throughout the entire province. And probably, while I don't know the stats for other provinces, it's unlikely much better. So it seems to me that it would be harder to get food to homeless people that they could utilize than it can with somebody that actually has a place to organize the food, prepare the food, cook the food, or whatever. So how do you access homeless people in terms of food supply?
So that's where we really focused on our agency partners. And so when I started 8 years ago, we had about 70 agencies that we would supply with food on a weekly basis. We've now grown that to about 180 agencies. So really what we're trying to do is, the homeless population, or the people on the downtown east side that need food, we supply the food to a lot of those agency partners down there. The Union Gospel Mission, we mentioned, organizations like that. Aboriginal Front Door is another one. Share Society, we help them as well. And there's just so many organizations there that they actually prepare the meals where people can go and get it. It's a soup kitchen, or maybe it's a snack program, or maybe it's a breakfast or a lunch program, something like that. We supply the food to those organizations to take care of that.
So there's an interesting financial benefit you and I were talking about with respect to something outside of the value of the food that is being provided, which is the change in health of the individual end user by getting access to this food, especially if it's more and more if it's fresh. So you said that you've started a program getting some research done in this with UBC. Do you want to talk about that?
No, absolutely. We are working with UBC this summer. And hopefully we're going to get it completed by the fall. But we want to do a study, and UBC is very excited about doing this. And it's sort of looking at the last 8 years where we've gone from 20% fresh food to actually now it's approximately 80% fresh every week. So what we want to study is what is the health benefit for somebody actually eating this quality food compared to what it was 8 years ago.
Right.
So when you have 80% fresh food being given out, and we're giving out milk and eggs and cheese and dairy and fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, what is that impact, not only on yourself, but your family and your children?
Right.
And so if we can get a study like that done, and we can show, and what are the cost savings for the government? Within the health industry, there's got to be significant cost savings. And that's why what we do at the food bank is one of the things that we do is these programs for kids, where we really focus on proper nutrition for kids. Our first program pack is, our baby steps start 0 to 12 months. So trying to make sure these kids have proper nutrition, but trying to make sure the parents have proper nutrition, because when you don't eat properly, there's mental health issues, there's other health issues for children, early diabetes, there's all sorts of different things that happen. And one of the most moving days I had, I think, in the last 8 years was when one of the after school programs that we give food to, and I went to see the lady who runs this after school program, and there's probably 30 kids in this after school program, and I went into this room, and it's from 3 o'clock till 6 o'clock. And she literally said, "Look what you've done." And I said, "What do you mean, what have I done?" And she said, "Well, look at the kids. They're quiet. They're studying."
Yeah.
And she said, "Before you did what you did, we used to get snacks, but it was kind of high sugar, high sodium, not what you want to feed kids." And she said, "Now you're giving us cheese and dairy and fruit and vegetables." And she said, "Look, there's less bullying.
Yeah.
They're getting better grades. They're quiet." And I was like, "Oh my God, it's that simple." Like what we're trying to do, it's that right there in that room, that after school program.
So it's interesting. So maybe you can expand on what the actual issue or the need is for kids in school with respect to hunger and food.
Well, it's so many kids go to school hungry. It's such a sad state of affairs in this country. You hear stories all the time of teachers trying to keep a cupboard of sort of some snacks or food that they can give kids. And that's where I believe that we as a food bank, so what we can do is some of the things that we're trying to do is take some of the surplus food and turn that into healthy snacks where we can freeze dried fruit.
Yeah.
And the
like this stuff here.
Well, the surplus fruit, we have freeze dried strawberries. It's different from dehydration. Some people confuse it that we're dehydrating. We're not. It's freeze drying. And it's a more modern technology. And when you freeze dry anything, it maintains about 97% of the nutrition.
Right.
It loses 75% of the weight. And so just imagine if we take the surplus that we can get our hands on and we can actually distribute that to schools and organizations with kids to give them healthy snacks.
So it would be a reasonable question, especially for people that support the food bank, to ask the question, okay, well, obviously these are people in need. These are definitely at the lowest levels of income strata in the country, without any question. And so you would have assumed that there would be at least reasonable government support for the financial requirements necessary to provide the food. So is that the case?
Unfortunately not. We really don't get much assistance at all from government, either federal or provincial, but my hope is that will change. And sort of my goal over the next 2 or 3 years is to build a model where we can showcase what we can do with preserving some of this food. And we can freeze dry it, we can flash freeze it. Right. We're also starting to juice some of the surplus fruit that's out there. And if we can create a model, then absolutely I would like to approach government and have them step in to create that model around the province at a bigger scale.
So David, we were talking earlier about your looking at the infrastructure. Now you have this, great location here, and partly as a result of a very generous donor providing some capital, some building, some infrastructure to allow you to build a better platform, to do more work, distribute more food.
Totally.
Now, you had mentioned to me that you see the potential to expand both the infrastructure and the delivery of food by a huge number. So what are you thinking, what numbers are we talking about here?
Well, what we're trying to do, we saw in the last couple of summers just the abundance of food. There's so much surplus food, especially vegetables and fruit and berries in British Columbia. We have such an abundance in the Okanagan and in the Fraser Valley. So our goal in the next in the next 2 to 3 years, my strategic plan that we've been working on together with my board and with my leadership team is I want to have another 50,000 square foot warehouse in the Lower Mainland where we flash freeze the surplus vegetables.
Right.
That gives us time to distribute it around the province to people that need it.
Right.
Other food banks, other charities, other organizations that serve food. And there is just this massive amount of vegetables. For example, if you just take zucchini, we had in 1 week last year, we had about 800,000 pounds of zucchini donated.
Right.
And if we don't have the mechanism to flash freeze that or to extend the life of it, we can't distribute it quickly enough. So I want a 50,000 square foot warehouse where we can flash freeze product. And then the other thing we want to do is a bigger warehouse in the Okanagan, probably in the Kelowna area or Lake Country, where we would do a 75,000 square foot warehouse where we will do the freeze drying on scale and we will do juicing.
Right.
And so in the Okanagan alone, there's about 150 to 200 million pounds of surplus fruit every year.
Right.
That's just fruit. And so if we can take advantage of some of that surplus fruit, the apples and the pears and the peaches, and the strawberries and blueberries, and if we can extend the life of that through freeze drying and juicing, then we can take our time to distribute it. And what we'll try and do with those two warehouses is, we want to make sure that we get the capital, obviously, to put the infrastructure in place, to put the equipment in place, but then the operating costs.
Yeah.
So probably about 20 to 25% of what we produce, we will actually sell to the public.
Right.
Grocery chains, Loblaws have already been talking to us. They're incredibly generous and supportive. And then 75 to 80% will go to people in need or schools or other charitable organizations. But I need that 20 to 25% to cover the operating costs, and all of the money from whatever we sell will go back into helping achieve that.
So your plan right now, if I understand it correctly with the board, is to develop both the infrastructure plan and obviously budgets around that and capital required and timelines required, and then an operating budget which would support the capability of having a much bigger infrastructure that can produce more end product, distribute more food.
Absolutely. And then this model that I'm convinced will work, then we will go to the government and say, here's a model. And we're helping people in need. We're helping kids in schools. We're helping the farmers. If you can get a tax credit.
No, it's a big deal.
One of the really good examples, what we did last year was there was an apricot farmer in the Okanagan. And just about to pick the crop, it wasn't quite ripe, and a hailstorm, thunderstorm went through, hailstorm, and these little tiny marks on the fruit on the tree.
Yeah.
So none of the grocery chains would purchase this fruit because it wasn't perfect. We bought the entire orchard of these apricots, and we processed them. And it's actually up behind me here, sour apricots in that bag.
Right. Okay.
So those are the sour apricots. We freeze dried the entire orchard full of fruit, and we paid the farmer. I think it was about $40,000 for that product, but we saved the farmer. He would have been out a large amount of money. We paid him for the product, and now we have an amazing sour apricot freeze-dried snack.
Right.
And it has a shelf life of 20 years, believe it or not.
No kidding.
Any of these freeze-dried products, if they're stored properly, we could actually send this on the next lunar mission and into outer space. Imagine the Greater Vancouver Food Bank in outer space.
So I'm assuming that you're looking towards private donors and maybe specifically businesses to help be the bulk of the funding, capital funding you need for infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So what's your message to potential donors in that category, businesses and high net worth donors?
Get involved with the food bank, or come and have a conversation and try and understand what we're trying to do. We do have a solution for food insecurity in British Columbia, and my hope is that the model that we build maybe will be replicated or copied across the country. But it's like the first time I met you, John, and I toured you through the food bank.
Yeah.
When I tour people through the food bank, they come with this preconceived idea.
Right.
But literally everybody, by the end of me touring through the food bank, like yourself, you said, this is amazing, how do I get involved? And so I would urge people, if you're interested in helping or giving back to the food bank, we are a charity, we are a non-for-profit, but I'm also a not-for-loss.
Yeah.
I run this like a business.
Right.
I have 80 full-time employees, And we only run because of the generosity of individuals like yourself, other members of the public, other corporations, and other business groups. So if you're not involved, please come and have a conversation, because we will build this infrastructure. We will build these other warehouses with the machinery required to freeze dry or juice or to flash freeze, and then we'll be able to distribute right around this province.
So how much of the issue for you is whether or not potential businesses and donors really understand your narrative, understand what's happened, what's transitioned over the last decade or so, especially related to the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, and understand where you believe you can take it? Like, do they even, like, I would say for sure that if I asked any of my clients, did they realize that we are a country that produces enough food to feed 50 million people, they would say, well, you're nuts. They would say, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I was, okay, well, then it would be a good idea for you to get clarity on what the real situation is, what the real problem is.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing, because if the donors feel, well, this isn't a food problem, it's a distribution problem, now all of a sudden what they think of as an effective gift is completely different.
Totally.
Right.
And I think as well, we had part of my frustration, and my team's frustration, especially in harvest season. We had such an abundance of vegetables last summer. We were trying to distribute it. We were phoning all these other food banks, these other organizations in British Columbia, and people couldn't take it because they didn't have the refrigeration.
Right. Okay.
They didn't have the infrastructure. We ended up shipping surplus vegetables last summer to Calgary, Edmonton, and to Quebec. So outside of the province, because there was nobody within British Columbia could take the volume of food that we had.
Really?
So what we need to do is we need to preserve or extend the life of this products, this vegetables and this fruit, and then we can take our time and distribute it. And my hope is that we will be able to encourage other organizations to have the refrigeration or the warehousing needed to take this.
So they would need infrastructure as well.
Well, they would need a certain amount. With the freeze dried, for example, you don't need the freeze dried can be stored in any warehouse. Obviously, for the frozen, it needs to have freezer capacity. But I think that once we prove this concept of what we're trying to do and how we distribute it, maybe it's just simply a weekly distribution around the province. That we can start with, and we distribute it. It gets handed out pretty quickly because we can send it in a truck and keep it frozen.
You must need a decent truck fleet to make all of this happen.
We actually have a decent. We have about eight trucks right now. I actually just purchased a 53-foot tractor trailer.
Right.
So that's the biggest truck you can get, refrigerated or frozen product that we can move around. In fact, I did something pretty cool a few months ago, and I used some of the frozen mandarin orange juice that we now have, which is made from just mandarin oranges that were heading to landfill. And we shipped a 53-foot tractor trailer of vegetables to Regina Food Bank, to Saskatchewan.
Really?
And they unloaded that tractor trailer of all the fresh vegetables we had, 20 tons. And they sent back to me what they had in surplus, which is grains and pulses and oats.
Right.
So 20 tons of pulses and oats and grains came back to Vancouver. So I moved 40 tons of food across the country.
Right.
We paid for it through a gentleman I know in the trucking business who did it for cost, which was $6,000.
Really?
And in the first month of selling mandarin orange juice in the grocery store, we made $8,000.
Yeah.
So I actually moved 40 tons of food across the country, and I paid for it by selling surplus mandarin orange juice.
Yeah. Very creative.
Well, there is a solution, and this is what I'm trying to get across to the business community as well. Get involved with this, because this is actually fun.
Yeah.
And when you can create something that's fun and innovative, and there are solutions here, and partner with the food bank. I mean, it's you yourself have seen the effect that we've had on organizations and people.
Yeah. Well, I think people are pretty inspired by it, and they're inspired by the story, but they're mainly impressed by the creativity that goes into the innovation that goes into this, because they wouldn't have thought of the solutions that you guys have come up with. You have really developed some interesting solutions. They wouldn't have recognized the problem in the first place the way you do, and then looked and said, well, if that's the problem as opposed to what everybody thinks it was, then all of a sudden we need to be thinking outside the box on the solutions.
Yeah, and my goal as well out of doing this is right now we distribute about 10 million pounds of food. my goal is to distribute about 40 million pounds of food.
Yeah.
And so if we can do that in the next couple of years, I've kind of proven the concept. Like, we can do this. And I know that there's people out there that want to get involved with this. There's private individuals that they donate money to many different charities. And I know that people can get behind what we're trying to do and just look at this model. I mean, just what are the sense of, I hope we're sitting here in 2 years, John, and I hope we're talking about what we did and where we're going to go next, because I can see this happening. The other thing is, not to be sort of a downer on it, we don't have a choice. My concern in the next 5 years, how many people are retiring? How many people don't have the necessary funds to retire, are going to be at an age where they can no longer work? And so many people living paycheck to paycheck. We can, as an organization, need to be ready.
Yeah.
We need to be ready for what's coming. Because right now I don't see a different solution. I don't see, apart from a huge increase in older people coming to use the food bank, my fastest growing demographic in the food bank is 65 plus.
Yeah.
And when I first budgeted,
doesn't surprise me.
When I first budgeted for we give out a seniors pack once a month on top of the weekly food that people get. My initial budget for that was about 1,500 seniors, 65 plus a month.
Yeah.
We're now at 3,500.
Yeah.
And that's just in about 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm really concerned in 5 years' time. So if we don't do this now, we're not doing our job, because our job is to plan for the future, to be here for people that need help.
Do you ever get pushback from, let's say, the grocery industry, saying that, okay, you're providing food, and in theory, if these people had enough money, they would be writing a check or paying cash at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. But they don't. But regardless, the fact is that a greater percentage of the population now is dependent on what you can do or what other food banks can do. So does this become problematic for the grocery industry, which you also work with and somewhat depend on?
I don't think so. I think it's like the non-for-profit world. Everything was in silos, and nobody would work with each other. I think this is just a natural progression of the grocery chains need to work.
Yeah.
In all aspects.
Yeah.
And the grocery, Loblaws are a great supporter of ours. Yeah. And I think this is literally all I'm doing is I'm saying, as you quite rightly pointed out, the people that come to the food bank can't afford to go to the grocery store and buy a lot of the products. So all I'm doing is I'm not taking food from the grocery store. I'm taking surplus from farmers mostly. Just this great abundance of food that's out there.
Right.
And I'm just going to repurpose it, and we're going to sort of become this manufacturing food bank company where we're juicing and freeze drying because of the surplus food. And what people don't realize is the amount of food, and this is a documented fact, the amount of food that's rotting in landfills around the world, the greenhouse gases given off from that rotting food is 5 times more than the airline industry.
Really?
And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
So just imagine, in fact, Mexico are way ahead of us. Yeah. Mexico, there's a lady, Mariana, runs about 89 food banks in Mexico. Mm-hmm. They actually rescue so much food that they're trading carbon credits on the market as a revenue source to come back and support their work.
Okay.
Amazing work being done.
So when we think about these questions I was asking about earlier, like, what is your current reality? What does good look like? It seems to me that your current reality is that you are operating already a very effective, efficient organization. Like, you are, pretty well 8, 9 out of 10 as you are. The challenge for you is that where you are is not remotely where you want to be. Yeah. And so there's a requirement moving from A to B that you will have to logistically figure out.
Yep. And
it's definitely going to require capital.
Absolutely.
Right.
But I think it just requires partnerships and an awareness. I toured Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, Wendy Kunkia, through, and her husband, His Honor Sergio. Yeah. And I was talking with them about sort of the food bank we had, and they were amazed by the look of the model that we have and how different we are. And I was talking to them about building these other warehousing, and then I'm thinking, we should partner with their charity, the Pacific Autism Family Network.
Right, of course.
And similar to YVR, where we have paper planes, where neurodivergent individuals are hired to work in that coffee shop. we should do the same thing with our warehousing as well. And there's so much more to this food bank than just giving people food. I want to create these partnerships as we build these facilities and do this, sort of extend the life of fruits and vegetables for people in need. But here in our Lougheed location where we are today, we have these other wraparound services. I've already partnered with 7 other organizations. So we have Work BC is here, Immigration Social Services here. Canadian Mental Health Association is here. We have RBC coming here to teach people about, financial skills and what they can do. And RBC's been amazing. They've actually offered some of our clients, a free banking account and how to advise them, how to help them sort of, budget and what they're trying to do. So we're trying to offer all these wraparound services. And I think that's all part of this vision of the food bank of the future. Like not only just building 2 warehouses, running them effectively, making sure that it's sustainable, sort of from an operating cost on a monthly basis, but then partnering with other groups to bring in other individuals. My biggest hope is that we can find people work and we can find people jobs and that they're not reliant on using the food bank.
So effectively, you're looking at it as a safety net.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Right.
And it's also it's an opportunity for people. The number of people that come to Canada, obviously immigration is down, but we have clients who are engineers in other countries.
Yes.
And their qualifications aren't recognized here. So they come to Canada with their family for a better start in life or a better life, and they get stuck in this cycle of poverty where they're working in McDonald's or they're driving an Uber and trying to support their family, but they can't take time off work, which is not covering their costs in the first place. They can't take time off work to go back to university to get the qualifications they need to be recognized in this province.
Now, it's very frustrating. And though I do know one organization that actually does, interestingly, provide micro-lending financing. So what they do is they're basically saying to, let's say, the engineer, okay, you're going to have to go back for 18 months. It's going to cost $15,000. So here's the $15,000. Yep. And it's a loan. Yep. But you don't pay anything on it until you're back and you've been graduated, you have a job, and then you can start to repay it. And so it's interesting, you're right about various organizations all dealing with different aspects of the same issue, which does effectively come down to one form or another of poverty.
Well, how amazing would it be if I could partner with BCIT or someone or Simon Fraser, and I'll say, if you have somebody doing a course for 12 months, 18 months, we will supply the food for that family while they're doing this course through the university to get the upskilling that they need or the proper credentials that they need to get into. I mean, how much better for the economy?
Yeah, it would be a very attractive thing to offer, wouldn't it?
They're amazing.
I was going to ask you when we talked about it a little bit earlier, but from your perspective for the organization, and maybe for you as well, what is first quadrant for you? What is urgent and important at the same time?
I think urgently, I need to put this, everything that's in my head, I need to put it on paper and a plan. And we made a huge start on that. But I need to solidify the plan right now with my board of directors. I need to, secure warehousing locations and I put a business plan and a model together for how do we fund this? How are we actually going to pull this together?
Yeah.
And so that's what's really sort of front and center for myself. The day-to-day operation of the food bank now, I mean, we have a phenomenal team that run the food bank. We have amazing donors that support and help the work we do, not only financially, but, donating their own time. But, I would say that's my real passion right now is I need to put this plan together. I need to build this. I need to work with, I have an amazing group of people that I'm working with to help put this plan together. But what does this look like so it's tangible so I can present it? And then I can say to John Nicola, John, what do you think of this? And you can come back to me and say, you're missing this and you're missing this and you're missing this. But apart from that, we're good.
I think it's interesting you're asking that question, David, because it seems to me that no matter how much numbers are important, and I'm a numbers guy, so that's what that's my business.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, really what drives people to make a decision about yes or no has got almost nothing to do with the numbers and far more to do with what they call legacy issues or vision issues related to what they're trying to achieve or where they're trying to go.
Yep.
So when you talk to a wealthy person, for example, about, let's say, what do they want to do with their money? You know, you can grind through all the numbers and do a very fancy estate plan, go through all of the other things. Or you can just talk in very plain terms. All right, well, you have children and you have grandchildren and you have various organizations and charities you want to support and you have friends and family. Like, let's talk about what you see them and where you see them participating in the legacy that you're building. And once you have that picture very clear, how you get there becomes a different problem. So what our clients are saying to us, if I pick the picture, I define the why and the what.
Yep.
John, you figure out the how. So I'm encouraging what you should be doing as an organization is to say, can you define that what?
Yep.
So that people can look at that and say, that resonates with me. If you can basically quadruple or triple what you're doing here, and you can define the need and the impact on health and the impact on, life expectancy, any of the aspects that are important, my people can say, I give my head behind that.
Yep.
Okay. And then you have to say, okay, now let me tell you how that would have to be done. Because that's what I'm asking you.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
Right?
No, I agree.
Yeah. So
It's really cool.
But David, listen, this has been very impressive as always.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Always great talking to you.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure.
We've heard a great story from the Greater Vancouver Food Bank, and David has been very impressive. He has a very clear understanding of where he's taking it, but there's money and support that's needed now. So take a look at the screen here, and here's some information about how you can support the food bank today. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Wealth Exchange. You can view today's show notes and subscribe to the podcast on our website at nicolawealth.com/The Wealth Exchange. Some of the companies or securities mentioned during this episode may be held at the time of recording by Nicola Wealth. Please view the show notes for full disclosure of our position in these companies. This podcast contains the current opinions of the presenter, and such opinions are subject to change without notice. This material is distributed for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide legal, accounting, tax, or specific investment advice. Please speak to your Nicola Wealth advisor for advice based on your unique circumstances. Forecasts, estimates, and certain information contained herein are based upon proprietary research and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment product. Nicola Wealth funds and limited partnership returns are net of fund expenses charged to date. Any discussion of past performance is not indicative of future results. All investments contain risk and may gain or lose value. Projected returns are estimates only. Returns are not guaranteed. This is not a sales solicitation. This investment is intended for tax residents of Canada who are accredited investors. Residency restrictions apply. Please read the relevant documentation for additional details and important disclosure information, including terms of redemption and limited liquidity. Nicola Wealth Management Limited, Nicola Wealth, is registered as a portfolio manager, exempt market dealer, and investment fund manager with the required securities commissions.